Hello all you reference-loving cosmonauts, as always I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Rise and Shine, which is the new indie action-adventure 2D shooter published by Adult Swim Games and developed by Super Mega Team. It seems at the moment that every couple of months we end up with a new Adult Swim game, and that's no bad thing. Traditionally they have been pretty well built for the most part, and they usually contain a humour in there that does resonate well. At its core, Rise and Shine very much has a lot in common with traditional arcade shooters and bullet hell games. However, it does combine those genres and put in elements of puzzle platformers as well to create a blend of genres that does execute itself pretty damn well, and it does so with a nice degree of polish. The game places you in the role of Rise, who is a young boy who finds himself in a war-torn city because the planet of Gameworth has come under attack by an invading alien fleet. Rise, in his midst to escape, comes across a legendary warrior who is about to die and gives him Shine, which is a gun with a personality. And so, setting off with Shine, Rise tries to go and find the King of Gameworth to try and stop the invasion. The game does not take itself too seriously at all, and in fact it doesn't take itself seriously in any sense of the word. The game is packed full to the brim of video game pop culture references, which are often very humorous. The problem is that they do try a little bit too hard sometimes to really cram everything in, so that by a certain point you do get a little bit numb and desensitized to the whole experience, and it just becomes not that funny anymore. It's still very good, but a lot of the references will make you appreciate their inclusion, but for the most part there is a certain point in the game where it just doesn't become as humorous as it was at the start. In terms of the story, again, it does not take itself too seriously at all. It is a nice little story. I have to say the best point of that story is the fact that the player is often referred to, and the game does break the fourth wall in that sense, because the player is referred to as the guide, and Rise knows that a guide is now with him. And ever since the guide took over, he often complains that he's always dying and always respawning, and it hurts a lot to die and respawn over and over and over. So there is that kind of banter in there, which I did quite appreciate and I thought was quite funny. But let's get on to the good stuff. Let's get on to the mechanics themselves, because 2D side-scrolling shooters can go one of either way. They can go really well or they can go really bad, and there tends to be very little middle ground in that regard. Rise and Shine's mechanics work really well. The controls are fluid, they are for the most part really respondent, they don't really feel sluggish in any way. It's very much a case of the controls are very tight, which means that any kind of character control from that point is going to be down to you if you die or not. For the most part, I was a little bit disappointed probably about halfway through the game and thereafter. The reason for this is the game starts out great, and there's certainly a learning curve in there in terms of difficulty. For the first half of the game I was dying a hell of a lot, especially as new mechanics, new enemies were introduced into the game. However, I always feel that the most important thing for a game like this to do with any kind of 2D puzzle platformer shooter, the most important thing is that there has to be a consistent progression of difficulty. That progression of difficulty has to start at the start, and it has to last till the very end moments of the game. And Rise and Shine doesn't really hold that up. It remains difficult for the first half of the game, and then there just becomes a point where everything just begins to click, and you start to understand how the enemy mechanics work. You understand the movement patterns, you understand how the puzzles work, you understand how the boss fights work, you understand the audio and visual cues, and then after that point it never gets difficult again, and actually becomes, for the second half of the game, a really easy ride for the most part. And I have to say that that was somewhat disappointing, because I always feel every single game like this has that moment for players, and the best games of that genre always recognize that players are going to have that moment at some point in the game, and so switch up the mechanics, they switch up the difficulty, whereas Rise and Shine really didn't do that, which was a real shame. Now don't get me wrong, it was still a really fun game throughout. The problem was it just wasn't challenging enough, and that was something that I felt let the game down in a massive way, and was probably the game's biggest drawback overall, because everything else was executed so bloody well. The controls were fluid, the gameplay was fluid, the enemies and all the various visual and audio cues and the mechanics and the puzzles themselves were really well made. But there was just a point where the difficulty stopped, and for me that hampers anyone's experience when playing a game like this. That being said, however, I have to say Rise and Shine is a fantastic game. I really enjoyed a lot of the game's mechanics. I just didn't think that they were fleshed out enough. I loved the fact that you could switch between gun modes, so you could go from a fast-paced shooter to having to carefully guide projectiles through mazes to hit a certain button to open a door. You can change ammo type to go from normal ammo to electricity ammo to damage robots, and there's just all sorts of things to do that I felt was really enjoyable overall. One of the best things about the game is, of course, the audio and the visuals in particular. The graphics of the game are just sublime. I think the entire game looks wonderful. Each level is actually a work of art by itself. There's no split frames as you side scroll through the level. It's all hand drawn and everything looks great. There's so much detail in this game, and with all the video game references there has to be so much detail, because you will see, you know, in the backdrops various references to various video games. You'll see characters pass by, and I just absolutely loved the world in which this was created. I loved the fact that it was humorous, it didn't take itself too seriously, and I loved the blend between, you had these really nice cartoon animated characters like Rise and the various enemies, but then you'll see, you know, the character from Flappy Bird fly off in the distance in the pixelated form, and I loved that blend. I loved the fact that it was just a little bit zany, a little bit crazy, and overall created an experience that was very, very enjoyable. Overall, I have to say that I certainly recommend Rise and Shine, and I recommend it to people who don't even like 2D shooters, because I think it's accessible enough, and the world that they've created and the humor in there will make it so that even people who don't traditionally like 2D side-scrolling shooters are going to enjoy Rise and Shine. And because of the way that the difficulty kind of stops halfway through as soon as it clicks with you, then it will even be enjoyable more so for people who don't traditionally like this genre. However, for those hardcore enthusiasts, I have to say that you'll probably get a smile out of Rise and Shine. However, if you're looking for something that is really going to test your skills, then that is not here whatsoever. This will not test your skills. You will have a learning curve at the start, and then that will tail off, and the rest of the game will be an absolute breeze for those enthusiasts. So I think for those enthusiasts, it's worth a look just for the sheer fun of the game, in terms of how great it looks, in terms of its humor. But if you're looking for a hardcore experience, it certainly isn't here. And that was my review of Rise and Shine. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comment section below. As always, please hit the like button, subscribe, and maybe share on social media, and I will see you next time.